Admit it, this is what you think a BMW rider looks like. Now that's not your fault, because BMW spent the 80s and 90s building a reputation for making capable but unexciting motorbikes for an older cashed up market. Even when they made the most powerful naked bike in the world, the K1200R, it had a nagging touch of the sensibles about it. But there's nothing sensible about the bomb they dropped in 2010 with the release of this bike, the S1000RR. This Beamer's a reminder of just how much further we've pushed the limits since we first started calling things superbikes with the 1970 era's CB750. Superbike just isn't enough to cover this thing. I mean, it's got 193 horsepower and it weighs 183 kilos dry. I'd like to propose a new term, super duper bike. From the day of its launch, Super Grandpa started embarrassing the competition. In the last 18 months, this bike has dominated comparison tests in motorcycle press the world over. It's faster than a speeding Hayabusa, more powerful than a VMAX. It's the smoothest, it's the cleverest, and while it's a bit more expensive than a Japanese bike, it's heaps cheaper than any of the European competition. It's BMW's first crack at a super duper bike, and straight away it's the new benchmark. In most cases, the lion's share of a bike's character comes from the heart of the bike, the engine. And the BMW's engine is a little bit like Daniel Craig's James Bond. Its manners are impeccable, its manner silky smooth. It dresses sharp and it appreciates fine art. You'd never guess what grim, methodical violence it's capable of. It's the smoothest engine I've ever felt at low revs. I mean, Top Gear will happily trundle along at less than 40 k's an hour. And it'll accelerate from damn near idle without any complaints. That's true engine flexibility. Try that on Ducati and you'll rattle your nuts off. Or your bolts. In the low mid-range, your round town riding zone, this Beamer is so easy to ride that I'd put my nana on it. Power's there when you want it, but it's smooth and friendly, never snappy or bitey. The way the power comes in is just silky, it's so easy. You've got more than enough grunt for overtaking from as low as 60 k's an hour in top gear, so it's a very pleasant bike to ride around being lazy with the gearbox and saving petrol. By the time you make it up past about $7,000 on the tacho, it's really waking up. You remember you're on one of the world's fastest motorcycles, and you've got to start paying attention. And when the needle gets up near 10k, may God have mercy on your soul. This is where the German gets really angry, brutally efficient, horrifically fast. And while it's a long way from 10k to the 14.5k red line, you're there in an instant with the shift light flashing brightly in your face. And that's when it's time to snick another gear on one of the sexiest gearboxes in the motorcycle world. The S1000RR comes with a power shifter that gently cuts the power for you and fires the next cog in. You don't need the clutch, and you can keep the throttle open the whole time. That's common enough on race bikes, but race power shifters aren't much use on the road because they're designed to work best at full throttle and sky-high revs. Well, that's not a problem here. The Beamer system works a treat at relaxed road speeds and wide open throttle alike. It's very addictive. Speaking of wide open throttle, the S1000 has a strange habit when you open it right up in first. The front wheel starts bouncing up and down along the road like a lowrider with banging hydraulics. That'll be the traction control. It interprets your wheelies as a loss of rear wheel grip and it gently cuts the power. Each riding mode allows a slightly different degree of wheel spin out of the traction control, with the 150 horsepower rain mode cutting in the earliest. Full power arrives with a very gentle throttle response in sports mode, and things get noticeably snappier and more immediate in race mode, which is where I found myself enjoying twisty roads the most. And then there's Slick Mode, which doesn't even appear as an option on the dash until you've plugged in this special jigger under the seat. Slick Mode gives you more or less a quarter-turn throttle with extremely immediate power, and the traction control is set to allow you to wheelie for, get this, up to 5 seconds from a lean angle of up to 20 degrees as you exit a corner. That plug under the seat is not a bad idea. I'm perfectly happy to live without leaned over wheelies on the road, thanks. I'm not happy to live without wheelies altogether though, so I was happy to discover this button on the left switch block, which you can press to turn the traction control off altogether. The traction control is so unobtrusive and confidence-inspiring on the road that the only real reason I'd ever want to turn it off is for one-wheeled shenanigans, so I found myself calling it the wheelie button. I think more bikes need a wheelie button. You start feeling naughty as soon as you push it. On the other end of the bike, but using the same wheel speed sensors, is BMW's own race ABS unit. It works a treat on cold tyres, wet roads and the like. It electronically proportions a bit of braking towards the rear in everything but slick mode to keep the nose from diving too much, and it can also sense when the rear wheel comes up off the deck and implement anti-stoppy measures by easing the braking off on the front wheel. Of course, if you like stoppies, you just have to hold down the wheelie button for a second or two, and it switches the ABS system off altogether. I was very glad I'd left the ABS on when I took my buddy Karen out on a cruise for her first ride on a sports bike. We were trundling along a back road going way under the speed limit when a Toyota Hilux driver ran way wide on a bend and forced us off the road in one of the closest calls I've ever had. We missed that idiot's truck by a matter of centimetres and speared off the road onto the gravel and grass. But for a razor-sharp sports machine on nearly slick tyres, the BMW handled like it was raised by dirt bikes. I got it slowed down and back onto the tarmac without a moment of doubt. Karen's first sports bike ride didn't turn out to be her last. Let's talk about design. BMW doesn't like symmetry on any of its bikes, and as a result the S1000 has a hole on one side and a set of gills on the other. Its wonky headlights give it a kind of angry pirate look, and a few fashion victims I know cited this as their main reason for not buying one. The indicators seem preposterously low, you could just about use them as highway pegs. The exhaust and the rear fender make the otherwise pretty sharply dressed back end look a bit pedestrian. But then, look at me, I shouldn't be criticising anyone's appearance, and all in all, I think the Beamer actually looks pretty cool. In all my years of riding though, I've never come across this before. The whole damn bike is held together with those weird star-shaped Torx bolts. Yes, they give you a pissy little tool to get the seat off, but even that's a giant pain in the ass. And it's not just the fairings and engine bolts, you actually need a Torx driver to do things like adjusting your levers. And good luck finding one of those if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere borrowing tools off bemused farmers. Oh, and the oil sight glass is in a really weird spot that's kind of hard to get to as well. Then again, who works on their own bike these days? I don't know. One group of people who do have to work on this bike a lot is the Procon BMW team, currently running the S1000RR in the Australian Superbike Championship with Glenn Allerton doing the riding. Glenn's race bike is actually last year's press bitch, the same bike all of us journos were flogging last year, and here's what they've put on it. Race fairings, Öhlins suspension, a Kropovich exhaust, rear sets, and calibration and power kits out of the BMW accessories catalogue. That's it, no engine changes, no top end work. This bike isn't a factory special, it's just about bog stock. And Glenn's currently dominating the Australian Superbike field, 67 points clear of second place and looking pretty much untouchable for the championship. And that's what kind of motorcycle we're talking about here. It's a 320 k's an hour rocket ship that's capable of winning races just about straight out of the box, which makes it all the more remarkable that it's such a pussycat on the road. For a first effort, Super Grandpa is already the #1 sports bike on the market. Italy and Japan should quake in their boots at the prospect of version 2. You know what I'd like? I'd like to see it with a funny front end.